Happy Prince. Many years ago, in a land far away, a weary little swallow flying south for the winter landed at the feet of a tall golden statue in the middle of a town square. Shivering from the cold, the swallow had just tucked his head under his wing to sleep when a huge teardrop landed beside him.
"Who are you, and why are you crying?"
"They call me the Happy Prince."
"Happy? Then why do you cry so?"
The statue explained that from his lofty vantage point, he could see into every corner of every house in the town, and many of the things he saw made his heart truly ache. That night he saw a poor woman, thin and drawn, toiling over a gown for one of the Queen's maids of honor. In the corner, the woman's son sweated with fever. "Dear swallow, would you pluck the ruby from the hilt of my sword and take it to that woman? Then she can sell it to buy medicine for her son." The swallow agreed. He plucked out the ruby with his beak, and carrying it through the woman's open window, he dropped it into her lap. When he returned to the Happy Prince, the swallow was surprised to find he no longer felt cold. That is the kindness of a good deed warming your heart. The next evening, as the swallow prepared to be on his way, another tear fell from the prince's eyes. This night he had seen a young writer slaving to finish a play. With no money to buy wood, he had fallen into an icy sleep. "Pluck the sapphire from my eye and take it to the young man." The writer woke and was overjoyed to find the jewel that would buy him food and fuel for his fire. The little swallow returned to nestle for one last night beneath the feet of the Happy Prince. Next day, as the swallow again prepared to leave, the prince was once more filled with sadness. Down in the square, a little girl selling matchsticks had dropped them all in the snow and now had nothing to sell. "Take her the sapphire from my other eye."
"But you will be blind,"
the prince pleaded, and, unable to refuse him, the swallow plucked out the prince's other eye and took the jewel to the little girl. She wept with joy at such unexpected kindness and ran happily home to tell the great news to her family. When the swallow returned, the prince urged him to leave quickly. "Winter is taking hold. If you stay any longer, you will surely freeze."
"You are blind, and there are so many more people to help. From now on, I will be your eyes."
True to his word, the little swallow flew out high over the city, reporting all the sadness and misery he saw. "I am covered in gold leaf, dear friend. Use your beak to ease their sorrows." And so, as the snows grew heavier and the winds more icy, the little swallow flew those tiny glimmers of kindness to every person in need throughout the city. Day after day he flew out, no matter how freezing the weather or how painful the effort. But, as it must, the day came when no gold or jewels were left to take, and the Happy Prince stood stripped bare, as dull and grey as an elephant.
"I have come to say goodbye."
The prince was indeed happy that the swallow would now fly to warmer lands. But the swallow wasn't flying south. With all his strength gone, he knew that the only journey left to make was the one that led to sleep forever. He leaned towards the prince's face, kissed his lips, and died. At that very moment, there was a great cracking sound from within the statue as the Happy Prince's heart broke in two. So loud was the sound that the mayor, who happened to be passing, looked up. Shocked at how drab the Happy Prince had become, he declared the town must have a new statue at once. The very next day, the Happy Prince was pulled down and taken to the furnace. Eventually, when the flames died, all that was left in the ashes were the two pieces of his broken lead heart. They were thrown onto the garbage heap, where they landed right next to the body of the little swallow. And when God called for his angels to bring him the two most precious things on earth, it's no surprise to discover what they delivered: the tiny body of the little swallow and the heart of the Happy Prince. Pandora's Box. A long, long time ago, when the world was very young, a handsome boy called Epimetheus and a beautiful girl named Pandora lived in perfect harmony. They spent their entire days laughing and dancing. Life was perfect and they knew no sadness. But one day, one of the gods above, a grumpy old sourpuss called Zeus, flew into a jealous rage.
Why are they so happy when I am not?
Angry and envious by turns, he stomped about the heavens until he had devised the most wicked of plans. But he needed help to carry it out.
Hermes, attend me. I have a job for you.
And so it was that on earth the god Hermes could be seen struggling towards the door of the young friend's house. He appeared at their door tired and exhausted. He explained that he was on his way to deliver a huge golden box. He begged a place to rest his tired bones and somewhere to leave his sacred cargo while he performed another errand. Pandora and Epimetheus were happy to help him. Come in, set your box down and go as you please." As Hermes prepared to depart, he left the two young ones with a very stern warning. "Whatever you do, you must not open the box." After a time, Epimetheus and Pandora heard their names being called.
Epimetheus! Pandora!
Epimetheus thought it was their friends calling them outside to join in their play. He urged his friend to come with him, but for some reason, Pandora wanted to stay. Pandora watched Epimetheus head out into the gardens, and no sooner was he gone than Pandora heard her name being called once more.
Pandora! Pandora!
But now it no longer seemed to be coming from outside. It seemed to be coming from Hermes' strange and forbidden box. Pandora drew closer. She heard the voices again.
Pandora! Pandora!
She bent over to be sure, and this time she heard,
Please help us, Pandora. We are locked inside this dreadful box. It is dark and we are afraid. Please help us to escape.
So mournful were the voices that she thought she would go mad. They begged and pleaded, but Pandora could not forget Hermes' stern warning. Pandora turned away, trying to ignore the pleas, but there was such sorrow in the voices that finally she could stand it no longer. As if in a trance, she glided towards the box and wrestled with the golden chains around its girth. At last the ties fell to the floor, and Pandora slowly, nervously lifted the lid. No sooner had she done so than she realized she'd made a grave mistake. From out of the box came tiny, sharp-toothed brown moths. They circled round the ceiling before swooping down on Pandora, stinging her skin. All her life, Pandora had only felt joy and happiness. Now, Pandora experienced new feelings of anger, pain, and sorrow. She stared through the window at Epimetheus talking to another maiden, and for the first time ever she felt the stings of rage and jealousy. She looked up and saw herself in the mirror and felt shame and regret. The moths swarmed out of the window, stinging everyone they met. Pandora saw new feelings expressed on their faces too. She saw envy, suffering, bitterness, and greed. Pandora slumped to the ground, not even bothering to fight off the stinging creatures, so heavy was her sadness at what she had done. She looked up to see Epimetheus in the doorway, and for the first time he yelled in anger at Pandora. "What have you done?" And then a high voice broke through.
Please, let me out. Don't be afraid. I can help.
Pandora stared. After the tragedy she had already caused, what more harm could be done? And so Pandora went once more to Hermes' golden box and slowly lifted the lid. This time, a shaft of white light beamed forth and turned itself into a beautiful butterfly. It landed briefly on Pandora's shoulder, and she knew she had been touched by the light of hope. And in that touch, all the stinging wounds on Pandora's body were soothed and healed. It fluttered across to Epimetheus and did the same for him. Then it darted through the window and went forth to soothe and heal the wounds of the world. And so, in the opening of that box, Pandora's box, was the birth of pain and of hope forevermore.
The Tongue Cut Sparrow. A long time ago, in a tiny village in Japan, lived a little old woman with her little old husband. One morning, the old woman woke to find a sparrow sitting on her doorstep, shivering with cold. The woman gave the sparrow something to eat and held the tiny bird against her breast in the morning sun until its feathers were warm and dry. So grateful was the sparrow that it launched forth with the song of thanks. The song went on all through the day. It was the most beautiful song the old woman and her husband had ever heard. The next day, the sparrow returned to sing its song of gratitude. And the same thing happened the day after and the day after that. On it went, and that beautiful song never failed to give the old couple absolute joy. But to the cranky old woman who lived next door, it gave something else. It gave her a headache. She hated every warble, loathed every note. "That bird song's driving me mad!" Morning after morning she paced back and forth, pillow over her head, fingers in her ears, head inside a rice pot, until she could stand it no longer. She marched next door with her scissors. She grabbed hold of the tiny sparrow and cut its tongue. The little bird was so shocked it flew away there and then, much to the delight of the cranky neighbor. The little old woman and her little old husband waited and hoped, but they never saw or heard the sparrow again. So they decided to look for it. They packed a bag and set off, over mountain and through valley, all the while asking anyone they met if they'd seen that sparrow. A sleepy bat waved them up a hill and over a bridge. A nervous field mouse directed them on through woods and across a meadow. Finally, they came to the home of their good-hearted friend, the Tongue Cut Sparrow. The little bird was overjoyed to see them. He welcomed them into his home. He introduced his family and bade them sit while a great feast was prepared. And while they waited, he performed the very difficult and extremely complicated sparrow dance in their honor. After dinner, he asked his wife to bring forth 2 baskets. One basket was large, the other small.
"I wish you to choose one basket to take with you."
Thinking the large basket might be filled with all the sparrow's treasure, the little old couple pointed to the small one. "We have a long journey and we are old,"
Please let us take the small, light basket.
they said. And so it was that they bade a happy farewell, knowing that their friend the sparrow was alive and well. When they arrived home, they peeked inside the small basket and were astonished by what they saw. It was a bounty of treasures, priceless silks and precious gems, more than enough for them to live richly for the rest of their lives. But they weren't the only ones to see what the basket contained. The cranky old woman next door, who besides being cranky was an A-grade busybody, had been peering in their window. Her eyes grew wide as she saw the dazzling riches inside. The next day, she arrived on their doorstep full of pretend sorrow. "I am so sorry I cut the tongue of your much-loved sparrow. Please tell me where he nests so I may deliver my apologies in person." And so it was that she huffed up the mountains and puffed across bridges until she too arrived at the home of the Tongue Cut Sparrow. Naturally, he was not so pleased to see this old woman, but he showed her the same hospitality. She feasted well, she enjoyed the sparrow dance, and she was presented with the same 2 baskets to choose from. Now, really, no one could claim to be surprised by her choice. No one could say they'd be startled to see her struggling through the woods with a monstrously large basket, but the old woman didn't care how heavy and difficult it was. All she could think of was the riches that lay inside. As soon as she got home, she drew the curtains and rubbed her bony old hands with glee. She opened the large wicker basket and peered in. Suddenly, a whole swarm of creatures, bugs and beetles, biting and stinging insects of every kind imaginable, immediately flew out. They pushed and pulled and scratched with all their might. The cranky old woman inched her way towards the window. She opened a screen, hoping that the horrible insects might scuttle out. And indeed they did, with her in tow. In the years that followed, the old couple sat outside their house and never ceased to marvel at the beauty of the world and the joy of the bird songs. From time to time they did wonder what had become of their cranky old neighbor, but as it happens, she was never seen or heard of ever again.
Thumbelina. There once lived a woman who had one wish and one wish only, to have a little girl of her very own. The only person who could help her was an old witch who lived nearby.
I've got just the thing.
She handed the woman a magic grain of barley.
Plant this in a flower pot and you shall see.
Soon enough, a lovely flower sprang into blossom. Then the petals opened to reveal a tiny baby girl. You're no bigger than my thumb, so I shall name you Thumbelina. There was no other child like Thumbelina. She played in her tulip petal boat and sang the sweetest songs. Amazingly, though, she never grew bigger. How will we ever find a perfect match for you? But Thumbelina wasn't anxious. She was happy playing and singing in her pretty garden. Then, one night, a horrible slimy toad saw Thumbelina fast asleep in her walnut shell bed.
My son's too ugly to find himself a wife. She'll be the perfect match for him.
The slimy toad stole Thumbelina away, and when he got home, he made sure she couldn't escape. He put Thumbelina on a water lily leaf in the middle of a big pond. As the sun rose next morning, a dozen warty old toads gathered to look at the future bride. Poor Thumbelina could do nothing but weep. Those were lucky tears, though, for on hearing her sad cries, the fishes below nibbled at the lily stem until it broke clean away. A colourful butterfly came fluttering by, and Thumbelina quickly threw her sash up to it. After a while, the butterfly tired, so a flying beetle offered Thumbelina his help. But Thumbelina had never been so high, and she trembled with fear.
Well, you're no fun, and you've only got 2 legs.
The beetle dropped a terrified Thumbelina down to a field below. Now completely lost and far from home, she wrapped herself in a dried leaf and wandered through the cold woods full of dark shadows and strange noises. It wasn't long, though, before she stumbled upon a little cottage. When the field mouse that lived there saw how sad and sorry she looked, she brought her inside and fed her well. Thumbelina was very grateful and wondered how she could ever repay the kindly mouse.
If you clean my house and tell me a tale or two, you are most welcome to stay.
And that's just what Thumbelina did. And so the two got along famously until one day, one of the neighbours arrived. He was a terribly greedy, short-sighted mole, and he decided to invite himself for tea. Secretly, though, he was really interested in seeing Thumbelina, and the moment he laid eyes on her, he knew he'd found his wife.
You're the bride for me.
Thumbelina didn't want to be the wife of such a greedy creature, but the mole wouldn't listen and dragged her off. On the way, they came across a very sick swallow. Thumbelina wanted to help it, but the mole was cruel as well as greedy.
Serves him right, flying around all day.
Thumbelina, however, felt pity for the poor bird, and every day she snuck out to care for it. She looked after him so well that when springtime came, the swallow was strong enough to fly away.
I wish I could fly away too.
But she was stuck underground with the greedy mole.
You'll be the perfect bride for me.
On the eve of her marriage, Thumbelina left the mole's cold, dark burrow to feel the wind on her face one last time. As she looked up, a tear of joy welled in her eye, for there was her friend, the swallow.
It's time to find a warmer place to go. Won't you come? Are you sure? Completely. You saved me from death. Now I must save you in return.
Thumbelina needed no further persuasion. She climbed onto the swallow's back, and they flew far, far away. When they reached a land full of flowers, the swallow gently slid Thumbelina off his back and onto a blossom. She was so overjoyed to be among flowers again, and even more delighted to discover that all the flowers around belonged to none other than the king of the flower fairies. The king was no bigger than she was, and undoubtedly the most beautiful creature she had ever seen. The king felt exactly the same about Thumbelina. He asked her to marry him, and she instantly agreed. As the queen of the flower fairies, Thumbelina was permitted to sprout white wings and accompany her husband on all his flights throughout the kingdom. At last, the tiny Thumbelina had found her perfect match.